I'm Jess, and welcome to my channel where I talk about books. Today I want to talk about 9 Goblins by T. Kingfisher. My initial thoughts on finishing 9 Goblins by T. Kingfisher are that it was good, but not great, and I wish she had expanded more on some of the ideas she presented. This is kind of my default opinion for T. Kingfisher fantasy books. Don't get me wrong, I really enjoy them while I'm reading them, but they almost always leave me wanting more. But in this case, my initial opinion was wrong. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I was being a hypocrite. I advocate for people to read critically and try to improve their literacy skills, and here I am asking for an author to spoon-feed me information. In 9 Goblins, T. Kingfisher presents ideas about colonization and prejudice. On the one hand, I wish that she had gone more into detail on those subjects. On the other hand, she provides enough detail that I, the reader, can extrapolate and get pretty clear sense of what the role of colonialism, colonization, and prejudice play in the world T. Kingfisher created for 9 Goblins. I think my biggest gripe is that I don't have anyone to talk to about it. This would be a very good book for a book club to read. I don't have anyone to talk to about it IRL, but I do have a YouTube channel dedicated to discussing books, so here we are. 9 Goblins is about a group of 9 goblins who end up trapped way behind enemy lines and have to find their way back home. T. Kingfisher created a world where goblins are in an unending war with humans and elves. Here's an excerpt from the book. How the Goblin War, if you ask the humans, or the glorious conflict resisting the ongoing human aggression, if you ask the Goblin generals, or the bloody miserable mess, if you ask the 19th Infantry. The 19th Infantry is the group that we're following in the story. Got started really depends on which side was doing the talking. Humans and elves will tell you that goblins are stinking, slinking, filthy, sheep-stealing, cattle rustling, hen house raiding, disgusting, smelly, obnoxious, rude, unmannerly, and violent. The goblins would actually agree with all of that, and they might add cowardly and lazy to the list as well. Goblins have lots of flaws, but few illusions. As far as the human side of the war is concerned, one day the goblins, who had been keeping to themselves pretty well in the high hills and deep mines, came out to a human settlement, riding their pigs and waving banners, and holding a list of really laughable demands. The humans refused, and the next day they were hip-deep in short green and ochre people with tusks. The humans retaliated, the goblins retaliated for the retaliation, the elves got involved, the orcs got involved because the elves were involved, and by the end of 6 months, it was a horrible, churning, entrenched mess, where troops on both sides sat around for weeks on end and occasionally ran at each other, screaming. Again, the goblins would agree with most of that account, but there was more to it than that. Once upon a time, goblins had lived everywhere. Like rabbits, goblins are an immensely adaptable, quick-breeding lot, capable of living under practically any conditions. There are hill goblins and marsh goblins, forest goblins who live in trees, and savanna goblins who lived in network tunnels like prairie dog towns. There are desert goblins and jungle goblins, miniature island goblins, and heavy-bodied tundra goblins. Goblins live everywhere. Skipping a bunch of paragraphs, just kind of describing more about goblin culture. So the goblins lived over much of the land, and the woods and plains and deserts and whatnot rang with the cheery sounds of goblin complaints. Then the humans came. They came in small groups at first and cleared little clearings and built little houses, and the goblins didn't really mind. They're cowards after all, and there was plenty of room, so they had no desire to forcibly evict the humans. They just avoided those places. The clearings got bigger and the houses got bigger, and the goblins kept avoiding them, until one day there was hardly any place left that you weren't avoiding. And one by one, tribe by tribe, the goblins would melt quietly away into the wilderness to impose on the hospitality of the next tribe over. Sometimes, of course, it wasn't that easy. In a few cases, goblins wound up living on mountaintops and tunneling down instead of running away. On islands, they would have to steal boats and rafts from the humans and strike out across the ocean. Occasionally, they couldn't find another island without people on it, and a whole colony of raft goblins sprang up, traveling with the current, living on fish and seabirds, and whatever else they could steal from the human settlements. A knot of goblins even got stuck in a park for years, every avenue of escape having been filled by a reasonably large city. They survived by panhandling and occasional muggings, and a fair number established themselves successfully in the sewers, where they breed racing rats the size of ponies and wrestle white alligators in the dark. By and large, though, goblins went deeper and deeper into the wilderness, and the wilderness got smaller and smaller and tamer, and then one day, a goblin scouting for new territory found himself standing on a beach gazing out across the western sea. It was the end of the road. They'd pushed right to the edge of the continent, and there was simply no place else for them to go. Although it's not the point of the book, the story could not take place without the colonial expansion of the humans. There are definite parallels between the humans in Nine Goblins and the Europeans who colonized North America, just with a lot less genocide. The humans in Nine Goblins seem to have this attitude that says, I want this land, and since you're not using it the same way I will, then it's mine now. And how dare you ask me for some land back? This is my land now. So you're violent for starting a war with me. They probably also throw in some slurs. Nine Goblin presents a very watered-down version of colonialism, but it's still a good jumping-off point for further discussions on the topic. It's also not an intimidating jumping-off point, since it's a novella telling a silly, goofy story about goblins. While I was reading Nine Goblins, I kept thinking about How to Lose a Goblin in 10 Days by Jesse Silva. They are very different books. They're not even in the same genre. But there were definitely similarities. In How to Lose a Goblin in 10 Days, we see the prejudice and resulting violence experienced by the goblins in the chapters told in Ren's POV. Goblins are viewed as evil because they often work for Dark Lords, but they work for Dark Lords because that's the only job they can get and they need to earn money somehow. Through Ren, we see that goblins aren't evil and violent. We also see the violence they experience because they are perceived as evil, and therefore a threat that needs to be eliminated. Like the goblins in Nine Goblins, they keep being driven from their homes. Sometimes they are driven out by violent attacks. Other times they are driven out because their water supply and soil is poisoned by runoff from the dwarfs' mining operations. In How to Lose a Goblin, Ren's family loses crops because of a toxic runoff when the dwarves start mining nearby. And no one cares, because they're goblins. Indigenous communities losing access to clean drinking water because of runoff from nearby mines is a huge problem around the world because of the colonial mindset prioritizing resource extraction over human health and safety of the people who already live there. I really enjoy how both T. Kingfisher and Jesse Silva use goblins to hint at ideas of colonialism and the violence it leads to. That might not have been their intention, but that is the aspect of both stories that my brain decided to focus on. Now I want to reread Snuff by Terry Pratchett to see if I can find the same themes. If you have any recommendations for books with themes of colonialism with or without goblins, please leave a comment with your recommendation. I highly recommend both Nine Goblins by T. Kingfisher and How to Lose a Goblin in 10 Days by Jesse Silva. If you liked the video, hit the like button. Thanks for watching and have a good rest of your day.